Yep, I've managed to get a hold of the AMD-powered Minisforum V3 3-in-1 tablet before it officially releases. And, well, I have definitely been looking forward to trying to test this thing at some point this year, and so I want to like it. I'll say that ahead of time here. I have to also tell you that I was not paid to do this review. I did not sign an NDA to receive the tablet, and in fact, there was literally zero verbal or written agreements to do anything. Not a single email saying, hey Tom, if we send you this tablet, can you please say this? Nothing like that. In fact, if I wanted to, I could have made my review of this tablet right here simply be me uploading a video of my dog Jessie chewing on it, or at least theoretically I could have done that. I don't think I could have in practice because she actually kind of seemed scared of it. And I say all of this in the beginning just to make it clear that nothing at this channel has changed. I've never been paid to do a review or signed an NDA to review anything ever. And so that's that. And it has not changed with this product. And I want to give a shout out to Minisforum for being so cool about this actually, because you'd think, well, if a company stands by their product, why do they need an NDA? Why do they need an agreement? Why can't they just drop off something right before or at review day? And then if they think their product's good, assume most of the people they send it to will say good things about it. That's really the most pro-consumer and really the cheapest advertising method, I would argue, a company could do. And I just want to say that I want to see more companies do stuff like this. But anyways, I want to get into the review of this product, and it's a review that hasn't been rushed out. I've been sitting with this thing for 2 weeks now and really had time to think about and try every little thing, and so this will be an extensive review, and one with an extensive tweaking guide that unlocks far more performance than you will get out of this tablet at stock. So yeah, if you're someone who's looking to buy this or has bought this or even just has a Hawkpoint tablet that isn't from Minisforum or something in the future, I think my guide can help you a lot. But first, let me just start with my initial thoughts. And that first thought is that this thing just feels incredibly high-end and premium. I mean, it is rock solid. It feels like just like a really high-quality materials were used. And even stuff like the pen is incredibly satisfying to use. I mean, it's like super, super, super responsive. I didn't think I would like it. I'm not really a laptop pen user, but I will say if you are someone that uses a pen a lot with a tablet or a laptop, this one works fantastically. And on top of that, it has a 165 hertz display that is incredibly responsive and smooth. And it's not just for gaming. I mean, I tend to read in bed late at night, and with the brightness turned way down and a 165 hertz display, it is just easier on the eyes to have more fluid motion while I'm scrolling through articles online. And it also has incredibly high quality speakers on it. Actually, the best speakers I've heard on a laptop, well, since I can remember. Usually they have weird tinny issues or they're not loud enough. Or frankly, I've had a decent amount of laptops of just like software issues where they can never get as loud as they should be able to get. This thing has none of those issues. It sounds great and it can fill up a room almost like a smart speaker.
Germany's Schultz meeting with Xi Jinping in Beijing, indicating a shift in Europe-China trade tensions.
This is some of the best speakers you're going to get in a laptop, and the funny thing is it's actually a portable tablet, so I don't know what excuse I can make for some of the bigger laptops that just have terrible speakers. Now, on top of that, it also has pretty dang quiet fans. Yeah, look, if you push this thing with like Intel burn test and unlock the power levels and let it go for an hour, the fans can get loud. But I have to report that in typical usage, especially if you're not gaming, the thing is silent. I've never heard anything while not gaming unless I'm messing with the power controls or something. And on top of that, when I am gaming, it is quieter than just about any other laptop I've used as well. So I also just got to give it high marks for the acoustics and thermal as well. And I want to point something out actually about the thermals, because I think that this type of a design, a design that has a kickstand and actually puts everything up here in the tablet instead of down here in a keyboard, I think this is actually much more conducive to good thermal performance and really unobtrusive thermal performance. You see, as we have laptops getting thinner and thinner and thinner, we keep seeing companies shove all of this stuff into an ultra thin thing that you're going to put on your lap and burn yourself. Or if it doesn't burn you, well, you're probably going to block some of the vents if you're holding it or even putting it on a table. Well, maybe that's not an issue if you have like a 2-inch thick desktop replacement, but most thin end lights are running into these issues, I find in my experience more and more. And because this thing puts everything away from the keyboard, above and off of whatever surface you're putting it on, I think it just naturally cools better as well. And I think more laptop makers need to start thinking about if they really should be putting so much in a spot on a device that's probably going to be blocked by your lap, by a cushion, by a bed, or by something else, because this thing doesn't have that issue. And because of that, even if it were to get hot, you never feel it. Now, when it comes to the camera, I would say this isn't something that stands out as awesome as other features of this device, as you're about to see. So this is me using the V3 webcam, and I think it looks fine. I don't think it's the best, but it's certainly significantly better than the webcams I've seen on the majority of laptops I've used even to this day. It's just 1080p 30, but it looks solid, and I think it sounds okay. This is me using the front camera. Jesse, sit. Sit, Jesse. As you can see, it works fine in 1440p, but things in motion are definitely not ideal. However, I would say those cameras were better than I've seen on many laptops. So I guess the way I would put it is, if you think of the tablet like it is a laptop, then it has an above average set of cameras for sure. However, if you're some sort of boomer hell-bent on using tablets as dedicated cameras, no, it's not remotely as good as the latest iPad. And actually, a really cool and unique feature of this device is that you can use it like a display for other devices. And look at how easy this is here. I have this plugged into my phone right now, and then I just plug this in right here, and we wait a second and pray to the Lords that this works. There it is. It just works. There's my phone. I can just watch Netflix on a bigger screen with my phone if I want to. And if I want to do that with my desktop, I can get a very cheap, display port to USB-C cord on Amazon, and that will work easily as well. However, I have to say that I'm suspecting a lot of people, when they see that this tablet works as an external display, they're thinking, oh, I could throw this in my bag, and then if I brought an Xbox or a PlayStation or a Nintendo Switch, then hey, I can game on a bigger screen on the go. Isn't that cool? And the answer is, it is cool and you can do that, but it's actually not as simple as you think it is. You see, these consoles all use HDMI basically, and that means you need to use a unidirectional HDMI to USB-C adapter. But Amazon doesn't even want you to find them. It's actually hard to find them on there because they keep directing you to USB-C to HDMI adapters that will not work. And again, it's not like even the DisplayPort to USB-C that just works without any extra power added to it. You actually have to find an actively powered unidirectional HDMI to USB-C, and they're not as cheap as you would think they are. They're not as easy to find as you would think they are. And at least right now, most of them, well, they're not using the latest standards either, and then you need to plug it into a USB port to power it. So you're not going to get FreeSync or HDR with a lot of those, and it could look a bit wonky. And look, it does work. I want to be clear. It is still a cool feature if you want to use this as a display for your PlayStation 5 or something. But I don't think a lot of people have that cable on hand, and I do think a lot more people need to be aware of what they're getting into if they want to use it for that. Having said that, it does work. I was able to play Helldivers on it, and you know what? It has fantastic sound for a portable monitor. So it is good enough that I won't be buying any new portable monitors for the foreseeable future. If I go on a trip, for Christmas up to Minnesota to visit my family, I usually stay there for a week. Yeah, I usually bring my PS5 so I can play with my brother up there, whether it's on a PC or not. And yes, I will be using that with it. But I wouldn't say it's the perfect portable monitor. It's a good one, but it isn't the best one you could get, and there are some caveats when it comes to connecting your console to it. But speaking of travel, all right, let's get to the battery life of the V3 tablet, because I've got some incredibly good news for people on the go, but also some mixed news as well. And let's just talk about, if you don't plug it in, how long will it last? Well, I found in light usage, and by that I mean, I'm thinking of it like if you were walking around your kitchen, you just left it on the counter, and you didn't ever turn it off. So I had the screen almost always on. I would pick it up occasionally while I was sitting here working and just do something online. And, occasionally maybe the screen turned off. But generally speaking, the screen was on 90% of the time with usage here and there. In that scenario, I got this thing to last 7 to 9 hours. I actually think one time I did that, it got to almost 10, but that is light usage. But light usage with the screen on and often with the brightness turned up, unlike I've seen testing at some other places. All right, but then when it came to heavy usage, here I got only 3 to 4 hours, but it was heavy usage. I had Intel burn test with a single thread running the entire time, YouTube looping videos, and several readout apps on screen, and yeah, that lasted 3 to 4 hours. So I do think that's long enough, and definitely heavier usage than most people would get. You know, I'd say incredibly light usage, below 10 hours, decently light usage, maybe around 6 hours, heavy usage 3 to 4, and then if you're gaming, yeah, the thing lasts like 1 to 2 hours. But, you know, that's with the APU pulling 20 to 30 watts the whole time. And if you'll notice, by the way, what I'm describing here, in my opinion, it seems like the difference in battery life is almost entirely just down to how much energy that Hawkpoint APU in the tablet is using. It pulls 25 watts, then it's going to last 2 hours. If it pulls 15 watts, then it's going to last around 4 hours. And if it's pulling 5 watts, yeah, you can almost get it to 10 hours. To me, it really seems like the screen on this device and all the other components are using an incredibly small amount of power. I could almost just divide the wattage by the capacity and output and just get to the battery life it was going to get, depending on how much energy just the APU was using. And so that means on paper, its battery life really isn't one of the standout features of the V3, but you wouldn't say, at least in my opinion, it's something absolutely terrible. It's kind of like typical laptop battery life. But here's why I don't care. And this is where I get to the incredibly good news for people who want to take this thing on the go. This is the least picky device I've seen in my life when it comes to accepting power sources, to the point that I don't think you actually should be thinking about this in terms of like a laptop where you're like, oh, I better bring my charger and worry about where I can plug it in while I'm traveling. Oh, am I going to stop here? Should I go to some lounge in the airport and charge it before I get on the plane? You don't need to worry. You're always going to have something next to you that can charge it, because as far as I can tell, all this thing needs is a 15-watt power source via USB-C, and it will run, and then be able to play 128-player battles and Battlefield 2042, which I think is something worth pointing out. Yeah, I know some tablets like Android or, iPads, they don't require a lot of power to charge while they're turned off, but none of them can do high-end gaming like this can. This thing can do anything your desktop replacement can do for the most part, and you can charge it from a cheap phone power bank. And I want to be clear, this shocked me. I tested it 3 times to make sure it was working. This power bank for charging my smartphone that I just had in my travel bag for years, it could charge the laptop. Not quickly, but it seemed to do about 10% in 30 minutes or something. Meaning that if I used it for a few hours, it was at half battery life, turned it off, threw it in my bag while I was walking through the airport, when I got on the plane, I would have probably topped off my battery a decent amount to keep using it during the flight. And I thought to myself, actually, this thing was cheap, wasn't it? And I looked through my purchase history on Amazon. Yeah, this was a $14 15-watt charger that was genuinely working. And then I just started going through all of my other stuff, and I found like this old charger in my junk drawer, and it worked. It could charge my tablet. And I was like, wasn't this cheap and old? Yeah, it's from 7 years ago, and it cost me $12. That was charging my tablet. And then I went through everything that I had, and I was just curious, 5 watts, well, that didn't work. 12 watts, that didn't work. Then a 17-watt thing did work. And I found that basically the only thing you need, the only requirement for charging the tablet is that it can output 15 watts via USB-C. And I'm sure there are some people that are about to type in the comments, of course it works, you idiot. It's just USB-C, PD at 15 watts. Why would you need anything else anyways? And I would say to these people, yeah, I don't know. It's not my experience that every device, especially every device that can play like Battlefield Online above 60 frames per second, isn't picky about what charges it. And to make sure I wasn't crazy, I looked around online, and it's just a complete quagmire out there. Some people, their laptop works with a cheap charger. Some people, even if they don't have a dedicated card in their laptop, it just doesn't work. And many people, it just seems like there's like an arbitrary minimum power requirement for like Dell or HP, with a lot of people thinking they just put in some things so they push you towards getting their proprietary USB-C chargers. And other people actually report things like, yeah, I can use a cheap charger, but it cut my CPU speed in half and it won't charge the battery and it just basically is unusable. Not the case with the Minisforum V3. You can use any device 15 watts or higher and it will let your tablet run at like full functioning power. You can game at 30 watts in Battlefield with it. And that means that who cares? The thing, arguably, compared to a normal laptop, has unlimited battery life because it can use almost anything to charge it, and it is just not the case with a lot of devices. It is the case with some Windows tablets, I know, but even a lot of the ones that I put in the same tier of performance as this have pretty picky requirements for what will charge them. And anyways, speaking of game changers and performance, let's talk about the gaming performance on this device, including my comprehensive tweaking guide that gives you far more performance than you would get out of the V3 at stock settings. I want to talk about that, but first, an ad from a sponsor. Jessie loves to run, like, a lot. Like, so much that it's sometimes hard to keep her slow enough for me to casually run next to her. She's already quite a handful, and so I don't have time to also deal with earbuds that fit bad, sound bad, or die quickly if I have to deal with Jessie here at the same time, and that's why I use Basis earbuds. This piece of content is brought to you by both the MA10S and the MA10 Basis earbuds. The MA10S has 38 hours of playtime, and it is IPX4 water resistant with wireless charging and amazing sound, and it has hybrid active noise cancellation as well. And I mean, it really is just very, very high quality, especially given its price. And then if you have a large pocket and you want that extra usage time, the MIA10 is another great option that has 140 hours of playtime, waterproofing, multi-point connection, low latency for when I use them to game, and rapid charging. And important for me, the mic sounds good on both of these. Genuinely, it really does sound good. I can't tell you how many Bluetooth earbuds I've sent back to Amazon simply because it sounds like garbage when I'm trying to talk to people online or on the phone using them. That's a huge deal breaker for me. That's actually the number one thing I look for in earbuds, besides convenience and battery life, is how good it sounds on a mic. And these sound great. Seriously, these wireless earbuds sound better than just about any headset I've tried below $100, and thus I do recommend them. And right now, if you follow the links in the description, you can get both the MA10 and the MA10S for $10 off. And this saves you money and directly supports the channel. Remember that even just clicking on the link in the description helps the channel a ton, but buying these through the links in the description helps even more. Check out the Basis Bowie MA10 and MA10S earbuds today. Now, before I get to the benchmarks and what performance you can expect out of playing games on this tablet, I thought it would be good to get through the tweaking guide first, and a lot of it's going to revolve around using Universal x86 tuning utility. Links below for people actually using this as a guide who have the Minisforum V3 tablet. But before you use that app, I will say two things. Number one, I wouldn't bother with the BIOS. I couldn't consistently prove a lot of the power usage settings in the BIOS were really doing anything consistently. At least if they did briefly, they wouldn't work later. So I would just leave all of that at stock settings. But what you do want to do before using that app is you want to go to the Minisforum Space app that comes with it. You need to do this. Open up that app that comes with the tablet and make sure you select the 28 watt mode. That's it. The 28 watt mode, leave it at the performance mode, close the app. It will have applied and stay applied whenever it's plugged in forever. But you do need to do that first for this to really work well. All right. After that, open up Universal x86 tuning utility, UXTU, that's what I'm going to start calling it from now on, and then in APU temperature tuning, check the boxes to enable both of these, and then set them to a higher temperature you're comfortable with. I set the CPU temp max to 100 degrees Celsius and the skin to 80 degrees Celsius. And I myself am comfortable doing that because I never see the temperature get that high. And really what I'm trying to do is not run this thing at 100 degrees Celsius the whole time. I never saw it even get to 90. It's just I want to make sure that there's never any throttling algorithmically behind the scenes based on some curve with the temperature. I don't want that. I want the thing to not throttle. And so I do recommend you do that. Now, After that, go to APU power tuning, and I recommend you setting all of the wattage options to 45 watts and then maxing out the boost time sliders. I tested many other settings and many other power levels, by the way, and this is the exact level, 45 watts, that I think seems to boost 99% of the time without ever hitting some flag that limits its power consumption because the device notices that they're going outside of factory spec. 45 watts seems to get to kind of the max you can get when it's going to benefit you without being insane or flagging something in the laptop that makes it throttle. So that's what I would recommend. And then you're going to want to set AMD boost profile to performance, then go to auto and set all modes to use this custom profile you just made. And then finally, go to settings and click for this to start at system boot, minimize, and auto reapply as well. And boom, you're done. And you will know if it's working if you use GPU-Z or Radeon Overlay to monitor the power consumption of the APU. And then you turn on some stress tests like Intel burn test. And I do a CPU one. I'll get to why in a second. And in this test, you should see performance 30 to 40% faster than what it was at stock settings, and indeed be reading that it is hitting 45 watts. And look, I don't doubt that maybe in a week or a month or something, someone else will have some other app that forces even more aggressive things than what I'm telling you today. Maybe they'll have more undervolting results. You know, I don't act like I am the master of everything, and it is still early. This thing just came out. But I did try a lot of other things, and this is the set of tricks that I found consistently worked. Seriously, I tried fixing the GPU clocks to a higher thing, messing with the voltage curve. All of it was either inconsistent, like some apps benefited, some apps didn't, or it actually gave me lower performance than stock. So that is what I'm saying. What I just told you is what I recommend you do. I don't recommend you mess with anything else until an entirely other guide comes out from someone else that other people can verify is incredibly consistent. And the good news about my guide for tweaking here as well is I'm not doing anything that's going to brick your system or make you have to reinstall Windows or something. There's nothing here that screws with voltage or something that can melt your stuff. Again, if you want to keep your CPU temperature max at stock, then do it. I'm not telling you have to do that. I do recommend upping the skin limit though, because I don't really know what that is, and everything I could read on the device was that nothing was getting that hot. So just upping that so it throttles a little less often, that's what I think you should do, and I think it's safe. And now this is where I tell you that this really is kind of a trick I'm doing here. It's not doing exactly what it says it's doing. Your device is not always now, when it's plugged in, going to run at 45 watts. You see, it is still going to try and default back down to 28 watts most of the time when stressed very hard in a game. But in my experience, it seems to be trying to stay at 28 watts or a bit higher more often with these settings I've told you to apply. Like at stock settings in the 28 watt mode, it's typically hovering between 26 to 28 watts. But with this guide I just told you, I've noticed in a lot of games, it's usually at 29 watts, sometimes hitting 35 watts. And I quantified in benchmarks that it performs better than stock settings consistently. So I am sure something is working here. And the good news is that for some reason, when you're not gaming, it will pull about 45 watts when using CPU tasks, and it will much more often be boosting higher. In fact, I can even notice that when you're loading games, the CPU will be boosting way higher at higher power levels. So I don't know if it is actually at 45 watts. I do know that it's pulling more power and getting a bit hotter than stock, though, and benchmarking higher. And you're basically just tricking it into being a little bit above stock settings most of the time while you're gaming. You're not tricking it into like, don't think that you're going to up it even further at 95 watts. That doesn't really seem to do anything. But you know what? I even also noticed that with these settings, even on battery, it wasn't resulting to 22 watts anymore. And so my on-battery gaming performance, which remember, you can charge this from anything, so who cares, was much higher than stock. And so I'm actually very happy with the results that I got out of this thing after tinkering with it for weeks. But speaking of results, what is the actual resulting quantified performance of this thing after you've tweaked it in the way I told you to? Well, let's get into it. So, just putting this on screen, on average in 1080p, and this is an average of Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, yep, the ray tracing version, and Horizon Zero Dawn in The Division 2, I find that, of course, it is double the performance or over double the performance of typical Intel integrated graphics. But yes, it is not as strong as a 2060 and certainly not as strong as an RX 6600M. However, it did bench about 20% better than an old Rembrandt system. One of the best ones, actually, and it was a mini PC, not one as constrained by power consumption as this tablet was. And so this points to a seemingly almost fully generational uplift over even Phoenix here, if we look at the results from the Division 2. Now look, at 75 watts versus 75 watts, I don't know, maybe Hawkpoint would only be 5% faster than Phoenix in integrated graphics performance with the same memory speed. But in my testing here, you can see that Dan's Phoenix laptop lost by quite a bit despite pulling more power the entire time, not just bursting sometimes, the entire time. Dan's Phoenix was pulling 40 watts and losing to a 28 watt Hawkpoint. Now, undoubtedly, some of this is due to the fact that Dan's laptop has 16 gigabytes of RAM, mine has 32 gigabytes of RAM, but I also have results in this game from a 54 watt 16 gigabyte mini PC, making it more apples to Dan's. And yeah, with 16 gigabytes but using 54 watts, Rembrandt lost to Dan's PC by about 10%, showing that using a lot more power, 40 to 50 watts, same amount of RAM, yeah, Phoenix is about 10% better than Rembrandt. But then, I mean, especially if we go to something like Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, we can see wildly better performance out of Hawkpoint and even over Phoenix. And this wasn't a game that showed that it needed a bunch of DDR. It did want more than 4 gigabytes of VRAM, though. And so, yeah, I gotta say it, despite Hawkpoint on paper looking like a simple refresh of Phoenix, I am forced to conclude that if you are talking about sub 30 watt performance, again, I don't know if all of these were using 95 watts, I bet they perform more similar to each other, but at least below 30 watts, Hawkpoint feels like almost a generational uplift over Phoenix. And I looked around online briefly. It varies from benchmark to benchmark. But yeah, you can find games where Hawkpoint is doing double digits better performance than the average 780M from Phoenix. And most of those were, 35 to 45 watt systems. And of course, also on screen here, this is from Notebook Check, you can see that Hawkpoint is pile driving Meteor Lake in efficiency, and that's the 65 to 95 watt version of Meteor Lake, losing to a 28 watt tablet Hawkpoint integrated graphics. But anyways, I want to put the Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition results on screen one more time here, because it is funny to point out that it can, in some scenarios, beat even dedicated graphics cards like the 6500 XT. Again, yep, this would be because the 6500 XT definitely wanted to have more RAM. The 8GB version performed almost as well as a 2060 Max-Q. But then also, apples to apples, 35 watt Rembrandt at the bottom of the list here with 32 gigabytes of RAM. Good Lord, the 8840U is just absolutely destroying it by over 50%, showing massive games in this ray tracing title over a Rembrandt system that's actually on average using more energy. But alright, so I have quantified that Hawkpoint is definitely better than Rembrandt, even when it's using less energy, but that it's generally not as strong as a desktop graphics card, unless that desktop graphics card is running out of RAM at 4 gigabytes. But let's cut the bullshit. Let's stop running the settings that I use to try to run on every graphics card I test, going all the way up to a 4090. Let's just let me customize the settings and qualitatively answer the question with some real usage, real gaming scenarios. Is this strong enough, once I stop trying to run the same settings I would run on a dedicated card, to make me happy enough that I don't miss my 2060 laptop? The answer is actually yes. You see, in Horizon Zero Dawn, I could actually get away with gaming in 1600p with quality settings around 40 to 50 frames per second. But I decided to go to 800p with ultimate quality turned on, and then I did that because at that resolution, even with maxed out settings, this thing was running above 60 hertz, which is the adaptive sync minimum for this display. So I want to stay above 60 hertz if I can. And I thought it looked great. It felt super smooth, and it gamed well, or really better than a PS4 Pro would, because the PS4 Pro is limited to 30 frames per second in this game in lower settings. Even if it runs at a higher resolution, this felt better than that console despite being a tablet. That impresses me. Now, in Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, I had no problem gaming from 50 to 70 frames per second, again in 800p. Yeah, that's nothing fancy, but the gameplay was just as good as a dedicated graphics card. You know, I wasn't compromising by running at 40 or 30 frames per second and 480p with integrated graphics. I was running above 720p, generally above 60 frames per second, and it felt fine. And then finally, in Battlefield 2042, after loading at 45 watts because that CPU is unlocked to really push it when it needs to, it typically ran, actually in this game, 28 to 35 watts. I actually have a suspicion that this tweaking guide that I gave you in this video, what it's really doing is letting the GPU usually run at 28 watts max and then giving extra power to the CPU. And of course, in 128-player battles in Battlefield 2042, it's crazy CPU intensive, that scenario in this game. And yeah, it was generally running often above 30 watts, it said in this, and I had it set to low settings, but then with a dynamic resolution maxing out at 1600p, the max resolution of the display. And sure, it would often drop to 800p dynamically, but it was always above 60 hertz, always smooth, and it felt fine. And in fact, here's where things get even crazier. I would honestly say that gaming in 128-player rooms in Battlefield 2042 felt better on this tablet than it did on my old 2060 laptop. And that's for two reasons, I think. Number one, well, that 2060 laptop has a 6-core, 12-thread i7 that's just way weaker than the 8-core Zen 4 processor in Hawkpoint, and this was probably a CPU bottleneck situation where, well, that laptop would often drop down to 40 hertz no matter what resolution I put it at. And so I would take 800p, even though it was often higher than that. I'd take 800p locked above 60 hertz, then 4K dropping to 40, actually. It felt, especially in a competitive shooter, it felt way, way, way better. But then there was also stuttering that would show up sometimes in long battles with the 2060 laptop, and I can't help but think it's probably because it's a 6GB graphics card. Battlefield games love a lot of RAM and a lot of fast RAM, and, you know, even if I had 32GB that I upgraded in that old laptop, the GPU is limited to 6 gigabytes. And that really gets me to really the point of this laptop. No, it's not going to give you 4K gaming almost ever, but it is going to let you easily hit 60 hertz if you're okay turning down the resolution in settings. Not down to 480p, not literally minimizing every setting. You can turn some settings up. You can turn up textures all the time. But as long as you're willing to compromise, you're going to get consistent performance for years. That's not something I saw out of my 2060 laptop. That's something I would worry about if you have a laptop with any 4 or 6 gigabyte card. And so that was gaming. What about editing? Well, as far as I can tell, it edits as well as my 2060 laptop did, and it exports videos plenty fast. And I don't know, maybe that's because it actually has more teraflops than a 2060 Hawkpoint does. But the point of it is, it works well enough that it doesn't slow me down editing. And of course, it can do so on battery for far longer than a 2060 can, and I can charge it anywhere. And so yeah, even when it comes to editing, this is now my daily driver for mobile gaming, mobile editing, mobile everything. And that gets me to the conclusion, actually. This, or really something like this, is something that is way overdue for hitting the market. You know, something that is a premium Windows tablet that uses the latest AMD APU and doesn't compromise on features, giving you what you want, and doesn't do stupid little things that hold it back simply because of careless design because there's an AMD sticker on it. Something like this is way overdue for hitting the laptop market. And I can't help but think that it's actually pathetic that it took someone like a smaller company like Minisforum to finally make it happen. But, you know, that means I hope it sells very well, because I think a message needs to be sent to OEMs that if they're going to keep shoveling the same shit when there's better stuff sitting around for years that they could be using, then some other company is going to come in and eat their lunch. And, you know, this is the ultimate Windows tablet. It's finally here, and it finally doesn't compromise, and it finally also has some cool features that nobody else is doing. It gives you what you want. It gives you what you've always been waiting for, and it does so without forcing you to get some Intel CPU that's going to use double the triple the energy and still have worse performance. So yeah, I think if you've been waiting to get a Windows tablet, this is the premium device you've been waiting for. And it's not cheap, but it doesn't cost $3,000, $2,000. So it's actually pretty reasonably priced, considering that it really, in my opinion, doesn't have competition in its price point with these features. And I guess the last thing I will say is, yeah, I mean, it would be nice if it had Strix or something, right? And if you want to know what Strix is, this channel exclusively leaked those APUs years ago. You can check that out. But the long and the short of it is, they'll be a lot better with CPU performance, 12 or 16 cores, depending on the flavor, for the top-end Strix Point and Strix Halo. And yeah, they'll probably have 20 to 50% better graphics performance than what this will have. And yeah, you might argue that would be perfect. If we just got that little bit more graphics performance, wouldn't it be perfect? Maybe, but yeah, couldn't you wait another year then and get another 20% or another 20%? You can always be waiting for the next best thing, and it's about time that this just exists at all. And it actually hit a threshold I kind of suspected it wouldn't hit, but it did. With Hawkpoint, it does it. It hits the ability to play every AAA game I tested above 60 frames with reasonable settings at a reasonable resolution. You're not compromising down to 30 frames. You're not compromising down to 480p. You're not turning every single setting lower and turning up everything that lowers your, resolution scaling or something silly. It looks fine, and it games on battery fine. You can charge it anywhere, and it has premium features. So there's always something better around the corner, but I'm telling you, if you're in the market for it now, and if you're not, yeah, something new will come out in a year. Get the better thing if you don't want something now. But if you do want something now, I am telling you, the Minisforum V3 right now hits the minimum threshold to do all the things you would want something like this to do. And it is the best convertible in the market right now. Full stop. And that is going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please remember to like the video, to share it, comment below for the algorithm, and then also make sure you are subscribed to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel and ring that bell button. Seriously, it helps so much if you subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel. And it actually helps even more if you subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead Patreon, especially with what's going on with YouTube revenue lately. It's basically gone. So all of this effort that was put into weeks of testing by me, the podcast I do with Dan, the person who edits the podcast, Gerard, people who helps with notes and puts together stuff with me, Carbon Cried, the person who renders stuff for leaks, Jean-Philippe, all of this is paid by the Patreon, and we can't do it without our patrons. So if you have even just $2 a month, consider joining us there. Even at that $2 tier, by the way, we just put out a primer for this video that has a bunch more backstory to the testing and things that I was discovering testing laptops with Dan. So that's just another 1-hour bonus video for you right there with no ads, and there's a whole catalog of hundreds of episodes of Die Shrink out there right now that you can go listen to right now, just at the lowest tier. Then also, you'll be able to ask guest questions. The next guest is the Fox. He is somebody that does in-depth testing of handhelds, including Windows handhelds and laptops. He has a ton of knowledge in what it takes to tweak CPUs and a lot of thoughts on upcoming Strix. You can ask him questions if you join the lowest tier on the Patreon. Also talk about this video with me afterwards. I'd love to discuss my findings with you in a civilized space where not everything's in all caps. But you know what? I will say this too. No matter what, if you made it this far through this whole video, at a minimum, thank you for watching.